Thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. When looking at your marketing mix, are you truly using cross-channel strategies that use different types of channels to complement each other? And I'm not simply talking about showing an online ad on one cookied website and then having another ad show up on another. I'm talking about, are you using print, digital TV, email, etc., all based on retargeting triggers? Dave Smith is the CEO and Darren Fisher is a VP at Incremental Media, an agency specializing in using insert media, print, and direct mail to complement digital channels. And on this episode, we'll discuss the power of direct mail and digital postcards, retargeting in an online world, and utilizing the two channels together. So let's tune in to some print pros with an online shark and go pixel the postcard on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right, so Darren and Dave, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and where you got to be today with your positions at Incremental Media.
Okay, this is Dave. I'm going to jump in. Well, I'm the founder of Incremental Media. We started the company about 13 years ago. Our main specialties are insert media, shared mail, magazines, and digital retargeting postcards, which we'll talk about more. Prior to that, I was CMO of the division of Cablevision. Actually reported to Charles Dolan, the legendary founder of HBO, and Cablevision was my direct boss. And earlier in my career, I ran marketing for Columbia House and Doubleday Book and Music Club, so I'm dating myself, going back a ways.
Darren, how about you?
Yeah, hi, Kenneth. This is Darren. Pleasure to be on your show. My background is in direct response and direct marketing, primarily agency side most of my career. I owned and operated a media agency that I started back in the mid-'90s, specializing in direct response TV and radio. I've worked for a few different agencies over the year and a little bit of marketer side experience as well, but more recently I was vice president of a direct marketing performance management agency where I led the integrated media and marketing strategy team, and also held a similar title at a digital marketing agency prior to joining Incremental Media just about a year ago.
So let's dive in then and talk a little bit about some of the different tactics that people use. You know, so much of this focus and so much of marketing's focus and the show's focus is often on digital, whether it be, you know, some conversion conversation regarding a landing page or Google traffic or something like that. But let's talk about the analog version of digital and talk a little bit about direct mail. And it's still number one, you know, from a direct response. It still performs well. But maybe just talk about the power of direct mail and where you see advertisers and agencies using it today.
So yeah, good question. You know, it's interesting. I think anyone in the audience who has experience in direct mail will already know this, but it's direct mail is still a thriving industry. In fact, it's a $45 billion industry. So, you know, to put it in perspective, you know, Google did $34 billion last year in ad revenue. It's as you said, Kenneth, it's still the number one driver in direct response, but it's you know, it's all about doing it the right way, and it's all about the quality of the list. So some marketers probably have tried and failed and have moved on, but it's a hugely profitable channel, but it's all about having the qualified list, and that's the key.
Talk about why you think it's so powerful a medium. I mean, when you think about so many channels, you know, people having more access to their computer, their phone, obviously that's where a lot of people are spending a lot more time, their tablets. Why do you think direct mail still is so powerful?
You know, with direct mail, it's you know, with everything that's digital these days, you've got banner ads and everything that's competing. You know, everywhere you turn. Direct mail, the one thing it's about it is it leaves a lasting impression. Everybody checks their mail. Every piece of mail that comes through your mailbox touches your hands. And the one thing that's great about direct mail is it leaves a lasting impression, and I think that's one of the key factors to the success of direct mail.
You also have access to so much data and the ability to target people based on things they purchased in the past, based on their income levels, based on whether they're men or women, based on the types of products they buy. So it gives you the ability to be more precise than any other channel in terms of doing a deep data dive and being able to target the people that you want to target effectively.
So let's talk then a little bit about the power of retargeting. It's obviously one of the best advents. It's one of my favorite tools to attract customers back to my own personal page, and companies use it to do as well. But talk about the power you've seen in retargeting in digital marketing.
Sure. Well, the idea that someone could be on a site and be expressing interest, but then leave the site. Typically only about 2% of the people on a site actually buy something. You have the ability to do online retargeting. You have the ability to follow them around and put an offer in front of them and an ad in front of them to potentially try and bring them back to the site. So it's been a powerful tool since it came out 6-7 years ago, and tries to take some of that 98% of the people that don't buy and bring them back.
Mm-hmm. How do then you start, as a company, start looking at ways to turn a retargeting method like a pixel? How do you go about turning that into a direct mail follow-up piece? Because there's never been great alignment with retargeting with direct mail or postcards or things like that. But kind of elaborate, if you will, on going that perceived pixel to postcard type route.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have the ability now to take it one step further, because not only can you identify cookie the device and stay online and follow them, but by cooking that device, you can find in the home mailing address associated with that device. When you buy a product, you check you check the iPhone box or your Droid, your phone or your computer or tablet, you're agreeing to certain terms, and there's databases out there where information exists that are associated with a given device. And I'm not talking about an IP address, but the device itself. And once that device is identified, you can do in real time a match to say, is there a match for an address or not? Typically about 70% of the time you can find an address. And how do you go from there to turn that into a postcard? Well, first thing you have to do before you utilize this and send a direct mail piece is it's critical that a privacy policy is updated and has the appropriate language in it that says the information that's gathered may also be used for the purposes of sending direct mail. And then once a match, then when you pixel the device, once a match is made and its address, it's determined that there is an address match. You can kind of take that to the next level by modeling the browsing activity. And since it costs more money to get a postcard out, it's important to make sure that you don't just mail everybody. You mail the people that have shown the greatest interest, someone that maybe started on their phone and came back on their laptop, did a deep dive, looked at lots of pages. And then the next step is that you can do digital printing and vary based on what they were browsing for. You can actually change the offer on the fly. If they were looking for one product over another, maybe you can offer something within that product category over the other. And then the last component is that you use first-class postage, because you really want to hit them quickly. The recency is so critical. Just like with online retargeting, it's immediate, where it could be minutes later, seconds later, or hours or days. With the postcard, you want to get there as quickly as you can. First-class postage helps ensure that.
So, Dave, kind of elaborate a little bit further on the process, and I want you to talk a little bit about the timing as well. With that light up with a pixel, how quickly can you get a postcard in somebody's hand to retarget them? Even with first-class postage, how quickly can I start looking? Because there are a lot of businesses that maybe are seasonal. There are some that have a shorter window. But where do you see some of those processes and timing, especially as to how that gets turned over quickly?
Sure. Well, from the time that someone's on the site, it's determined immediately in real time whether there's a match for an address or not. And it could be that the timing is such that the person does such a deep dive on that initial visit that they're worth sending, or it could be that it was such a short visit they're not good enough to send, and it might be you got to wait longer for them to come back again. But once you determine that they're good enough to mail, tomorrow a postcard goes out first class, and then according to the USPS, 1 to 3 days later, someone's going to receive the postcard, depending on where you are in the country. So it is a quick process. It's probably about from the moment they're on the site to the moment they receive it, could be, I'd say, 2 to 4 days later, they'll have it.
So most of that's probably pre-printed stuff, except for the name and address.
Not necessarily. It happens on a digital press, and
Sure.
and you can vary it right there, and it literally gets printed on a daily basis as it goes. And then some of the other things in the process to consider is you want to provide a suppression file. So if you already have existing customers that come back to a site all the time, and you already have their address, you don't need someone to go find an address for you. You want to suppress them and not mail them. The other thing that you want to consider is the creative and the offer. We typically recommend that someone does something slightly better than what they saw on the site. Because if they saw something on the site and they decided not to order, if you gave them an extra 10% off, or you threw in free shipping, or something that would be enough to push them over the edge, that would usually help in the process. And then, of course, the last thing is to track the results to see what worked and what didn't work. And typically, you can also do a matchback analysis where you can have a group of people that get a postcard and a group of people that are eligible but don't get a postcard, and you can measure the incremental lift of folks that got the card versus those that did not.
So, Darren, I want to get your POV on this, and also we'll talk a little bit about list data. But first question, where do you see sort of the paths go? Are people generally going from an ad to an offer, or are they doing research, and that's what you usually use to trigger those kind of digital postcards that go out? What kind of path are people generally taking that a lot of your clients are lighting up, to then send them a postcard?
I would, it depends on the website. I mean, if there are some websites that are, hundreds of pages, and then there are some that are more lead gen, that are going to be, a lot more simplistic in terms of website design. But that's where the data scientist comes into play in terms of what kind of criteria it takes for the modeling. Really is what determines what it takes for them to be be determined as a highly qualified prospect.
Well, then, for both of you, do you see more often where this pixel is placed on a website, on a customer's or their main domain, or are you seeing a lot of it where they're going to, say, a landing page and then abandoning from there?
The pixel or the JavaScript is placed actually typically on all pages of the website.
Okay.
And the most qualified prospects are going to be visiting multiple pages and actually having multiple visits to that website. Somebody who comes to the site and abandons after 10, 20, or 30 seconds, that type of activity or that type of behavior is typically not going to trigger a postcard.
And part of the answer to your question is it's most likely going to be the main site and not a landing page, unless that landing page is the primary source of traffic. Because in order to do this, you need to have a fairly significant size site that will generate enough volume to get the postcard out cost effectively. If it's a really small site that doesn't have a lot of traffic, it's just going to cost too much to get it out.
Sure. So, Darren, let me go back to Dave's point on a little bit on data, and have you elaborate a little bit on the quality of data and the list that people are able to provide? Where does that really come into play?
Yeah, that comes back to the data modeling, and you can call it data modeling, you can call it predictive modeling. It's really what we're talking about. The data scientists are with the modeling are really predicting who is most likely to respond and who isn't. And for those who are predicted to respond, those are going to be the ones who get a postcard. And additionally, there's a personalization component, and Dave kind of touched on this a little bit earlier with the digital printing. That the personalization comes into play for certain marketers, such as an e-commerce marketer who might have various categories of products. If they're selling, clothes, and they've got, women's dresses and men's shirts and pants. So based on the browsing behavior, with the digital printing, we can personalize that postcard to be mailed, and it can be targeted based on what they were, the category of product that they were viewing. It can be digitally printed with, as Dave mentioned, variable images, copy, and offer. personalized based on their browsing behavior.
Could you elaborate then on where you're seeing performance trends with using, this type of retargeting, using, a digital pixel followed up with a digital postcard? What kind of performance are you seeing across the board? And then if you could elaborate a little bit on maybe some types of verticals that you're seeing this perform extremely well in.
Sure. It's the crazy thing is that it is performing well almost across the board. And when I say that, it's great for e-commerce. As Darren said, you can do the modeling across categories and really choose the best folks to go for. But it's also great for lead generation. It's great for individual product sales. It's good for continuities. The only place we've seen it not work is low-ticket items. So, if you're selling a 1995 gizmo on TV and you're driving people to a site, that's not enough to cover there's not enough revenue in that to warrant sending a postcard, which is a lot more expensive than, for example, serving up a banner ad, even with the response rate being dramatically higher. But other categories, it seems to be working across the board. Our clients are telling us two things. One, that the ROI is consistently higher than online retargeting from a pure ROI standpoint, and for the most part, it's been the number one performing channel for across any channel that our clients have been using the program for. So, and we've seen that at least within our own channels, primarily in the print world, it's clearly been outperforming the other forms of print that we do. But our clients are telling us it's doing better than TV and radio and other digital things that they're doing. So, and it all comes back to the fact that someone has identified themselves by going to that site in the first place. Your original question about about retargeting in general. It's such a strong technique that someone's identified themselves by their behavior as being interested in a product. And you spend all this money from other channels to get them there, and yet if it's only like a 2% conversion rate, or some sites maybe a little higher, there's a huge 90+% group that's not there, and this is helping to convert that group.
And I'll jump in just one more note in terms of performance. This channel typically does 3 to 4 times better than traditional direct mail does.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of the fact that these people are basically raising their hand. They're in terms of interest in the brand and the product. They've already been to the site multiple times, and they just they need something just to push them over the edge, which is very different than traditional direct mail of renting or buying lists and things of that nature. So
yeah,
they
and
highly qualified. And again, we're talking about the modeling that we spent time talking about. That is a key component of this.
Sure, and traditional direct mail, a lot of it has to do with recency and the idea that someone was just there and you mailed them. If you went in old direct mail techniques, you would do things like, let me go run a list in the category that the person's interested in. Then the next level of direct mail was cooperative databases, which was much richer in data in terms of what the purchase history of these people were. And that's good and works, but this is kind of taking it to the next level of behavioral activity as opposed to just purchasing patterns from people that happen, days, weeks, months, or years ago. This is someone who is just on your site, so that pushes them to a higher level in terms of their interest. There's also a certain amount of banner blindness where
Exactly.
after you hit them, a certain number of times, they're just not paying attention anymore.
What other areas do you see doing this in? I mean, other than just pixeled website traffic, what other areas of retargeting does this work with?
Yeah, sure. There's similar programs that we're able to retarget to a marketer's unsubscribed email list. So rather than having a potential unmonetized asset of sometimes thousands or tens of thousands of emails that marketers can no longer do anything with, we're able to get a home address of 50 to 75% of the time, the match rate, and mail a postcard to try and reacquire that customer. And we can also do the same for a marketer's unopened email list. After a while, sometimes it makes sense to try another vehicle to reach those people. And then we believe this is a great alternative.
Why do you say, what is unsubscribed or unopened? Why is that the preference as opposed to an opened but didn't convert?
So if if you continue to send emails to the people who have not opened, the chances of them eventually unsubscribing can increase, and also marking you as spam also increases as well.
Sure.
And then lastly, phone retargeting as well. So if there's a marketer who takes a lot of phone sales as well, we can do a reverse append and send out a postcard to get them to call back in to reacquire that customer as well.
That's typically done when if you get someone calls in and they don't convert on the phone, and the rep doesn't get any information out of the person, but they have the phone number. You can then you still have the ability to communicate with them, and it works pretty much just as well as the digital retargeting postcard does. It's pretty comparable in terms of performance.
Right. Well, Dave and Darren, I really appreciate you joining us today, and if you would let people know where they find out a little bit more about you and Incremental Media.
Yeah, thank you, Kenneth, for having us. I can be reached. My LinkedIn profile can be found, Darren Fisher. Also, website, incrementalmedia.com, and we also have a specific page for the digital retargeting postcards, and that can be found at digitalretargetingpostcards.com.
Well, really, all they need to do is go to your website, swim around a little bit, bounce off, and then you'll send them a postcard to get them to follow up.
Swim with the sharks, my friend, our friend the shark. Yeah.
Thank you both for being on A Shark's Perspective.
Thanks, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Kenneth.
So there was my conversation with Dave Smith, CEO, and Darren Fisher, VP, at Incremental Media, an agency specializing in using insert media, print, and direct mail to complement digital channels. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with them. First, despite what we often want to believe as digital marketers, direct mail, according to the DMA's most recent response rate report, still continues to provide the best response rate. The CPA is higher, but don't lose sight of its value as part of the mix, especially when you could possibly turn a website visit quickly into a retargeted digital postcard. Second, as a general rule of thumb, only about 2% of advertisements convert in the digital space. Make certain that you take advantage of retargeting, the cookie-based technology that allows your brand to stay in front of bounce traffic after they leave your website. If they don't convert on the first visit, then you've got to stay in front of your audience over and over. Third, when you consider your marketing mix, consider using channels that complement each other. If you serve a lot of online banner ads, for example, then people can suffer banner blindness. The same can happen on all channels, especially when looking at any one singular channel myopically. However, if you can show them ads and then send through an even more powerful and diverse ad coming from a different channel, i.e. something like a direct mail piece, then you might see higher chances of them converting. You should at least study your mix well and vary it with ads that help to convert. Got a question? Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. And I'll leave you on this note. Cookie-based campaigns are my favorite. Why? Because they're delicious. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.